Okay, now we get to talk about robots. I'm pretty excited about this conversation. And we have quite the panel. We're coming at robots from a number of different angles here. So we have His Excellency Dr. Majid Ibrahim Al Fayyadh, who is the CEO of King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center. Joshua Browder, who is the CEO of Do Not Pay. Amir Hussain, the founder of Avathon, and Rohan Pujara, co-founder and general partner of Valhalla Ventures. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and we're going to just get right into it. Today is about purpose. It's about investing with purpose. So to kick it off, I want to start with Your Excellency. I feel the work that you're doing, first mover on robotic surgery, is a really big deal in terms of purpose. And I just want to hear you talk a little bit about that journey, what the progress is, and what we can expect in the coming couple of years related to robotic surgery.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with this panel, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad that Her Excellency, when she presented all the progress we see in Saudi Arabia, she sort of skimmed over healthcare to give me a chance to introduce something and make my talk fresh, basically. And I have to say, back in the robotic surgery or robotic in healthcare is not a new concept. And it has been sort of involved in other areas, in different areas like supply chain, pharmacy. Our lab is just to put the blood sample, and then the machine takes over the analysis and putting up the result. But it has not been in direct patient care. And that's something that we were excited about. And back in 2019, in our effort, we have seen how the whole kingdom is trying to advance and produce something new to the globe. And in our effort to take this technology to the next step, we embarked on establishing a robotic surgical program for which we said we are going to invest. We had a target in this. And then we introduced it gradually in different surgical arena. Cardiac, now we do cardiac, we do transplant, we do liver surgery, abdominal surgery, urology, gynecology, and many other services. And gradually we have applied it more and more. And now we do about 4% of all surgeries through robotic surgery.
Wow.
And we're hoping to do more. We want to make it the initial offering for patients, and patients will opt out. The reason we say that, when we started it, we built our experience in that, and we found that doing surgery through robotic, it's not a gimmick, it's not a game, it's not a toy, but it's much more than that. It is producing better outcome, shorter length of stay, better patient experience, less surgical scar, and eventually you get a happier patient and less cost. And that's basically the cost drive sustainability, and patient experience is what hospitals is, what healthcare is all about. But it's not only that. We did not want to introduce robotic just for the mere fact of doing robotic. We introduced a procedure that would be part of what we offer as a whole. So we build around it training, not only the acquisition, but also preparing our operating theaters, training people, hiring. And now the next challenge is basically to advance the type of surgeries that we do. In 2023, we did the first robotic liver transplant surgery from a donor, from skin to skin. So we take liver from a donor using the robot. The donor is happy because there is a smaller scar. And then we take that part of the liver, usually the left side, and then we give it to a patient, also through robotic. And that was the first of its kind. But the real advancement was doing the first robotic heart transplant 4 months ago. Was done by one of our surgeons, who I'm very proud, graduated from the same medical school back home in Riyadh that I graduated from, and was trained between Europe and the States and Canada. And finally, we did the first robotic heart transplant. Now, what does that mean to the patient? Smaller scar, instead of opening the sternum from neck to belly, It's just a small incisions, few millimeters in both sides of the chest. That means less blood transfusion, means less infection. Patients would stay 2 months after surgery. This patient was discharged on day 14. And I saw him a month in my office, walking happy, and now he's a spokesperson for what we do. So we looked at this as a technology that sort of, we introduced it for a purpose, to solve a problem. And we're very happy with the outcome. Now our target is to expand in the type of surgeries and in the number of surgeries. Our colleagues, the neurosurgeons, are jealous because there is no robotic neurosurgery. Yet. Hopefully, maybe next year, here I'll talk about our first brain surgery using robotic. So the point is, we're taking that technology. We're happy with adopting the technology, but the challenge is how we can advance the technology. For that, we need to invest, and then we need also to merge artificial intelligence. Every movement that the surgeon does with the robot is calculated and measured. And there is no reason why the robot can learn what the surgeon is doing, and in a repeated surgery, the robot would start take over what the surgeon is doing. And that would lead to more precise, consistent outcome, hopefully in a shorter time.
Okay, I can't think of a more exciting use case for our minds and our dollars than those kind of outcomes. So that's very exciting. Thank you. I want to go a little bit now and take a broader look at the business of robotics. And I'm gonna switch over to Rohan here in a sec. But the numbers say that we'll have spending of about $200 billion by 2026 on robots that are actually used inside of our company's operations. And this is a mind-blowing number. I'll just also remind us that last year at this FII, everybody was dashing out of the sessions to go try to close their investment in Figure AI. And they closed it at a valuation of, I think, $2.7 billion. Last week, they just announced it's nearly $40 billion valuation in the company. So this is kind of insane. What's hype? What does the business landscape look like? What are you investing in, Rohan? And you don't have to cover healthcare because we got that.
Hey, does this work? Okay. Yeah. So I think the way we look at it, and we're, for context, an early stage investor, so we invest when companies start or in their seed rounds. So something I think about a lot is where in the stack should we be investing, right? Should we be investing in the companies that make robots, the hardware, and then sell them to factories or to end users, or should we invest in the companies that just buy commodity hardware and actually do something of value with it, right? So my bias has always been, I think, at the early stages, right now, like you said, the humanoid robot space is very, like, there's a lot of money in it. Valuations are very high. So I didn't really think about that too much as an early stage investor because it's already kind of it's post early stage. It's now in the commoditization phase, at least for humanoid robots. So then you have more like factory robots. So factory robots are actually quite commoditized. You can buy hardware off the shelf, so the approach we've taken is primarily investing in the companies, like I said earlier, that do something with robots. So what His Excellency was saying is a great example of where you actually have a practical use of robots in the field, which can generate substantial revenue, obviously, because these are all things where you're replacing very expensive talent in doctors or surgeons, and that can do really well as a business. One company I like to give examples. So a company we invested in is called Deterrence. They do ammunition manufacturing. So today, ammunition is, in the US at least, is mostly manufactured by hand, which might be surprising to a lot of people. But a lot of people get injured. A lot of people actually die in ammunition factories. And I guess less importantly, it's also very expensive, right? Because we're using very old infrastructure from World War II, and it's not very efficient. So our company, uses robots, so uses commodity robotic arms to and customizes the process and builds manufacturing lines specifically for ammunition. So it's a bunch of guys from Tesla who are on the battery manufacturing lines at Tesla and designed those. They're now working on ammunition. So that's a great example where the company that makes the actual robots is probably not benefiting from the value that this company is generating, right? We sell ammunition at a certain price. That's all revenue and margins that we keep. We're paying relatively small amounts for the hardware itself because there's 20 companies that do the robotic hardware. And then I guess more on your point on the humanoid side, I think at least my prediction
I've heard the term the humanoid arms race.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
humanoid arms
that's
race.
how hot
Yeah.
it is right now, right? Do you
Yeah,
know that?
yeah. I think my prediction for who's going to win that space is whoever not only builds the hardware. I don't think you'll really see a company that's just selling humanoid robots per unit. I wouldn't at least want to be an investor in that company. I think it's going to be the company that sells the robot, gives a company or even a household, a consumer, a robot that is then useful for that business or for that household and charges a service. And that could be just like Apple gives you the iPhone and then they make a bunch of money afterwards, similar model. So that consumer company is probably going to make the most money. And I guess with a $40 billion valuation, some people are predicting that's going to be Figure.
Well, then Google's investing, Apple's
Yeah.
investing, Meta Reality Labs is investing. Like all the big guys are
Yeah.
throwing in now, right?
Yeah, so very legitimate people say Figure's gonna win.
Or not to Figure. I mean, maybe to Figure too, but I mean, even in their own
Yeah.
solutions.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are working on it. I think a company like Tesla is probably very well positioned. They're working on humanoids. They have very low cost of capital. I think their market cap is like $1.3 trillion. And they just have an amazing team, and they've done stuff in robotics before. I would probably bet on them, but yeah, I guess everyone has to make their bet.
Thanks. All right, we're going to come back to some of the nerdier bits of what you said later when we get to the tech section. But for now, sticking with business, I want to turn it over to you, Amir. Some of the industries that we've heard, we haven't yet talked about transportation, we haven't talked about security, but I think you have some really interesting flavor that you can add around manufacturing and how robotics is going to really alter that entire industry. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so about 12 years ago, I started a company called Spark Cognition, which I grew to $1.5 billion company. And that was focused all on solving industrial problems with software, predictive maintenance, and lots of issues that physical infrastructure, $100 trillion worth of infrastructure has in the world. And what we're doing now is we're building a company called Argon Mechatronics, which is focused on humanoids for manufacturing. Now, if you look at the general purpose humanoid that you see, many of the companies that you've seen with ads and YouTube demos and so on, these are great for things like logistics, moving boxes in an Amazon factory, etc., and even some level of less precise tool use. But if you really needed, fractions of a millimeter of precision, these robots aren't designed for that. They're not built for that kind of stability. They're not the kinds of robots that you would want going around on a factory floor, bringing tools to you and applying those tools to use. So we figured that that was a niche area for us, and it really jived well with the overarching theme that my partner Zabe and I have been investing in everything with, which is the technologies of freedom. Decentralized manufacturing, decentralized finance, decentralized communications, all of our companies are focused on that idea of technologies of freedom. And today, in fact, yesterday when President Trump was talking about Build in America, the issue with robotics is not just a technology issue, it's also a demographics issue. So for example, in the US now, the average age is 39 and a half years. In China, it's 40. China is aging quite fast. Japan is already far ahead of China. So humanoids are going to be important. The second thing is that the US is behind also on the overall ecosystem. All the manufacturing ecosystem that it takes to build these robots, we're behind. So one of the things we have to do is to build robots for manufacturing that get us ahead in the ecosystem in a non-traditional way, without building factories that cost tens of billions, build smaller, more compact robot armies, if you will, that can boot up production in this country. So that's another element. And the third piece is that 50% of the employment in the United States is really with small business. And that small business has been pushed to non-manufacturing activities because they really can't manufacture anything in the US. It's very hard to find labor. It's very expensive to get machinery. So our vision is to enable decentralized mass-scale manufacturing at low cost with argon, which can yield 12, 15 different tools. It can 3D print, laser cut, engrave, do foam cutting, all sorts of things that you need in small-scale manufacturing. And we've put in a ton of AI into it because obviously that's how you take the load off of someone who didn't grow up operating robots. So that's kind of how we look at it. And we're looking at it not just from the point of view of here's a product, we're looking at it from the full integrated chain of all the things that need to be done to solve our customers' problem. We want to sell them not a robot, but a business. I want to be able to go look at a small, medium business owner in the eye and tell them that, look, this is an investment in a stream of income. Forget the fact that it's packaged as 2 humanoids and 4 SCARA arms. It really gives you a livelihood that's autonomous and automated. The dividends of automation can be delivered to you through this embodied robot. That's what I'm excited about. And that's what I think this country needs.
I think that you're onto something. Everything that you're saying about the decentralized manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing, I think it's really important. I have a proposal for you. And anybody who knows me, who's heard me talk before, knows that I love new wealth creation models. I love, shared opportunities. And so I love the idea of advanced technology franchising. And I think not only is it a way for other people to have an opportunity to participate in ownership in a small or medium-sized business capacity, but they can really help scale these companies as well. So please put that in your pocket, and let's see if you can franchise some of these small factories. I love that idea. Okay, you got it. Okay, switching gears now to more of the software side. Joshua, you are focused more on the robotic process automation. And the software side of that. I want you to tell us where that fits into the ecosystem, but in addition, you said something very interesting earlier, which is that you think about how all these robots are going to play together, how they work together, the interoperability, which I think is really crucial when we're talking about making this work. So the last thing you need is, this software doesn't talk to that software, this humanoid won't talk to that humanoid, and so we don't have a system. We don't have a system in place. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I spent the past 10 years building Do Not Pay. And what Do Not Pay is it's basically a robot negotiator and advocate for millions of people. And I'm sure the question you'll have is, why do you even need that? But the government here and big companies and government is so broken here in the US that you do actually need a robot to cancel your gym membership or negotiate your utility bill. I really enjoyed the last presentation where everything is so efficient in Saudi Arabia. I wish the same was true in the US. I started the company because I got a lot of parking tickets myself, and I realized software is good at fighting parking tickets. And fast forward 10 years and we've expanded to over 100 different areas. And in that time, the AI behind it has also gotten, I would say, 1,000 times better. So instead of a template now to fight your parking ticket, we have robots, software robots, log into someone's internet account and start chatting with the company to negotiate the person's bill down. And what's interesting is that we use AI, our robots are fully LLM powered, but the big companies also use AI. So sometimes it's actually 2 robots negotiating against each other. So earlier, I think it was mentioned about the humanoid arms race, but we're actually part of the robot arms race where AI is fighting AI. And I think software is really important, but what we've found as a business is it doesn't matter how good the language model is. If you can't connect it to the real world, it's useless. And so we actually involve physical robots even in our software operation. So I'll give you 2 concrete examples. The first is some gyms in the United States, I don't know how this is legal, but they require you to send a wet signature signed cancellation letter to get out of your gym membership. So we've deployed our army of LLMs to figure this out. And the problem was a lot of gyms were rejecting our cancellation requests because they said it wasn't a wet signature. So we actually contracted with a robot company where the robot would sign the document and connect to the mailing service and mail out a letter on the robot's behalf. Similarly, we have robots send faxes. And then the second example is actually voice. As humans, we all use voice to communicate, and actually, we found that our robots really need to have some voice capability to get things done. And so we actually power a lot of phone calls as well, where a bot is phoning up a big company to get something done. And the way these robots kind of interact on the phone is very interesting. We had an issue a few months ago where I think this bot was trying to get someone's PIN to cancel their cell service. And the agent on the other end, who was a human agent, said, oh, okay, I'm happy to help, but what's your name? And the robot, we prompt the AI to always say, be truthful, because we're very concerned about liability and things like that. And so the AI was really confused because it doesn't have a name. And the AI said, no, I'm just the assistant of the person. It didn't say robot assistant because it sounds like a human voice. I'm just the assistant of the person. And the agent the human agent on the big company's end wasn't letting this go and said, no, I know you're the assistant, but what's your name? And this went back and forth like 4 times. And finally, the AI said, okay, you can call me Alex. So it didn't lie, it said you can call me Alex, which is technically not a lie. So it's very interesting how these robots adapt to problems and connect to the real world.
Those are such fun stories. So I see that there are at least 2 jobs for humans in the future of robots and AI, which is that we sign things, we have wet signatures, and that we can name things. So those are 2 jobs we'll have at least. I do want to talk about the idea of labor. We talked about how we will augment our surgeons. We talked about possibly replacement in certain manufacturing capacities. My industry is construction software, and in the US, we have a tremendous shortage of labor. And so I remember talking to all these fancy kids in Palo Alto at the schools, you should really want to be a construction worker. And, in the future, it's not going to be as dangerous. It's going to be not just safer, but cleaner. You might even be a superhero, right? Because there's, this exoskeletons potentially. And I mean, you could really sci-fi this out and realize that we have the technology now to make super construction workers. I want to ask you guys in your industries how you feel humans will play with these tools and what jobs look like. What impact does that have on the labor force in the near term? And then what are those new jobs? How does that relationship evolve over time? Do you want to take a go?
I'll certainly do. It's always comes up, and especially as a hospital administrator, I get that question all the time. So you're going with AI? What's happening? What's going to happen to my job? And recently, we held an international conference back home in Riyadh to look at to write the guidelines for robotic surgery. And one of the leading surgeons in robotic, he's out of University of Chicago. In his address, he said surgeons should not be worried that they will be replaced by robot, but they should concentrate in how to make the robot part of their daily work. And those who fail to do so would lose their job. So the point is, this is a new and coming wave. And we have to prepare ourselves because it is creating jobs in of itself. Right now in the OR, we have 2 new job descriptions that did not exist before. Somebody to maintain the robot, the other one is to do the connections and make sure that the robot is functioning well. And these are 2 new jobs that did not exist before, same like any other industry. But when you look at the healthcare in particular, we suffer from labor shortage, not the other way around. And especially labor shortage during crisis. Healthcare is very intensive and very labor intensive and sometimes demanding to the extent that people may not continue. Now, I'm not talking about surgeons, I'm talking about surgeons, nurses, technicians, and so on and so forth. And globally, there is shortage of highly skilled individuals. this can produce the solution. And I know that you have done some work in that area. And healthcare should be able to deal with the introduction of the robot, because having the highly skilled individuals doing a highly skilled machine that operate this robot would enable us to do more, better, and then we would, as I said, it will generate its own labor force. And we would be having people working in AI and making these robot function properly, and so on and so forth. So it is a concern. I get that question all the time, but just looking historically, and we have introduced, as I said, we have introduced a robot in our lab, in our pharmacy, in our supply chain, and we still hire people. It's just a different capacity with different skills and better pay, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely think the idea of eliminating human error from our surgeries would be an amazing thing. Does anybody else want to tackle labor?
So I care about this enough. I recently wrote a book called The Cybernetics Society, which is just all about this, how cybernetic systems come about as a combination of humans and robots, this idea of augmentation. But really, there's a science of study that is almost now 100 years old, that talks about how machines and people integrate. And my view is that there's so many angles from which technology is integrating with people. For example, BCI, you mentioned exoskeletons. The US military has made many investments in that area. There are other militaries that are doing that too. If you've looked at pictures of what's going on in Ukraine, you have a person wearing essentially FPV goggles, first person view, and then you have a drone flying out miles away, with this person controlling that drone, very low latency. At some point, you do that enough, you do that, as they say, for the 10,000 hours and become an expert, it becomes an extension of you. Those eyes flying at a distance 4 miles away kind of become an extension of you, and that's how you control it. So these are just 3 examples, BCIs, of which there are so many companies now investing in this, exoskeletons, and of course the robots that we won't necessarily integrate into our person, but that will start picking up extremely small and the slightest cues, whether it's emotional cues, whether it's a word that they will interpret far more than maybe even an individual will be able to, a slight change of tone. So the means of communication between man and machine will become much, much deeper. And the capabilities delivered in turn back to human beings will be much, much greater, to a point where, just like now, it's very hard to convince yourself to remember everything that you can Google, or to work without something like ChatGPT. As these tools become available in our lives, I think that dependency will transform us into a form of cybernetic being. That line, of course, will continue to move to the right or the left, depending on how society reacts to the idea. But the fact that that's happening, to me, is a given. It's already happening, and it's probably going to happen 6, 7 different ways. So in some sense, the dawn of robotics is also maybe the first chapter in the book of sort of a post-human world, in the sense that we might still roughly look like what we look like, but we certainly will be augmented in so many different ways that to compare the human of 2040 with the human of 1940 may be entirely unfair.
I think that's really exciting. I don't know if your book was sci-fi or real. I'm kidding. I know, I'm kidding. But I do want to stick with the sci-fi theme here for a second, because we are living in the future right now. It kind of blows my mind every day how much we can do. And when you said already 4% of surgeries, that blew my mind. So 2030, this is only 5 years away. What weird thing are we going to be able to do that will be our reality that seems like science fiction? And I think you all feel free to just go there too. Let's get dynamic here. Let's, I'm sure you guys all have the things you're thinking about of wow, we really could only be 5 years away from this way that the world works. And I know I didn't tell you guys I was asking this question, so whoever wants to start can start. I won't call you out.
I can start if that's okay. So I think there's two different things. I think about a lot. One is kind of to the earlier question too. Is I think right now there's a lot of jobs. You obviously there's some argument about whether you want to be replacing human jobs in certain things, right? But I think there are areas where there's a lot of jobs that humans don't really want to do. Like the company I mentioned earlier, the ammunition company. People get hurt, people die doing these jobs, so that not a lot of people want to do those jobs. I think if we can replace stuff like that with robots, that's a really inspiring future, right? You have less people that need to do these dangerous jobs because we have robots. And same can be said about like oil and gas inspection, or dealing with sewage, or like there's a lot of things that humans do today that people just don't want to do, and it would be a great future where people don't have to do those tasks.
Like eradicate all workplace fatalities, for
Yeah,
example.
exactly. There's a lot of dangerous jobs out there. And then also on the more kind of sci-fi side, I think what makes me most excited about all these humanoid robots is I think what I'm less excited about is like humans becoming friends with robots, and that type of stuff kind of scares me. I feel like humans should stick to each other, but on the I think what's really interesting is like using humanoid robots to help you do laundry, or do things around the house that actually save us a lot of time and give us more time to be with our families, and do our jobs and be more productive, use our creativity and all these things. So that's kind of my optimistic view of the future.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree with that, and I can give one kind of serious prediction and one fun prediction of what we'll be able to do. I think we're making years worth of progress with AI and robotics every few months. To give like a concrete number, the leading model GPT-4 from ChatGPT and OpenAI a year ago, it's now 200 times cheaper to run the same level of intelligence with DeepSeek than a year ago, and 18 times cheaper today. And this allows AI to be everywhere. So now you can just feed in everything, and it's very cheap for the AI to constantly be running in the background. So my serious prediction is that we're all going to have AI in our ear whispering, "That was a great meeting. Maybe you should have said that. Maybe you should say this on this panel right now," just constantly giving us feedback and telling us what to do. And I think the earlier point about a world with jobs that people don't want to do, I think there'll also be a world without friction because the AIs will just be doing it in the background. And then my fun prediction is, in addition to robot friends, like was mentioned, I do think, unfortunately, a lot of people will have robot girlfriends. I think loneliness is a epidemic, and for better or for worse, AI and robots will help resolve that.
I think that
No, I don't know if I can top this last comment about the girlfriend, but I think in healthcare, what we're going to see, and certainly there are lots of work that's being done now, and I think it will converge to produce precision medicine. And that's a term that's tossed around in healthcare a lot, and that really now has not materialized yet. But the truth of the matter is, if you go for a tailor, then they'll take your measurements to give you the best fit suit. We don't do that in medicine. It's one size fits all. And we prescribe the same medication for everybody, whereas we have different genetic composition, we have different environmental factors, and we have different body shapes, and so on and so forth. I think with the amount of data we are generating in genetics, with the amount of data we know about the health, not only when you are sick, but the machine learning and the information. We know only 3 hours of your lifetime. Hospitals, we know only 3 hours in a 70-year. The remaining part of your health, we have no clue what's happening. Now, with the amount of data that we're getting, I think one day, maybe 2030, maybe a little bit later, where you would walk in and all this data that's gathered from everywhere would give you the right diagnosis, the right prescription, the right medication. Everything will be tailored toward you based on your environmental factor, genetic composition, and then maybe even surgery. So you would go in and say, okay, you have this tumor you didn't know about, let's take you to surgery now. So all of this data is available, it's out there. With the strength of the processor that these guys are developing, and the amount of
In progress in simulated data, right?
exactly.
We've talked about that earlier.
We will get the sci-fi doctor soon.
You know, my view is that what's coming up in the next 5-10 years is kind of a forced reinvention of economics. And I say this because if you read economics, the most basic principles are land, labor, capital. These are the three forces that shape economics. And if you think about what humanoid robots represent, is that they are a stand-in for labor. And now that might not happen immediately in all sectors, but in many sectors, in many verticals, that may happen. So what we're saying is that it costs capital to acquire a stand-in for labor. In other words, we have obviated labor. And now that has never happened in the history of economics ever before. And the important thing there is that there is a group of people that bring labor to a society. There is a group of people that bring capital to a society, and there is a group of people and a political setup that generally contributes land under certain laws in order to create productive outcomes. So we are 5 to 10 years away from people realizing that very little land and really all capital can produce the kinds of economic outcomes that through all of history, all three of these constituents were necessary for. That is a very, very profound change, because in order to deal with that, you really have to rethink how rewards are allocated across these three classical, components of every economic system that's ever been
Yeah,
in place.
that's fascinating.
So that to me is possibly the most disruptive element, and it's not many years away.
You guys are so fun. I want to do one super quick wrap up, just like super succinct. Biggest challenge we face. Maybe it's a technical challenge, an ethical challenge, whatever, but just succinct, and we'll start with you.
With robotics, I think, I think probably for me, the scariest part of it is kind of what Josh was saying, where you replace human interaction with robot interaction. I think
Just a few words, just like super succinct.
yeah. I think that makes humanity pretty sad. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Today, my biggest engineering challenge is the reliability of models to drive safe behavior in robots.
I think robots lying and being dishonest.
I think it's adoption and openness to change, acceptance of, especially in healthcare. It's always risky and people hesitate, and we have to break that barrier.
That's amazing. And I would add one more thing, which is with all this AI and all these robots, we are going to have more abundant time than we've ever had before. I feel like we're not very good at using our free time now to do things that are particularly good for the environment or for each other. So I think that's a skill we need to have as well. I want to thank you guys so much. What an exciting conversation. And let's go. Let's go, robots.
Thank you.